7. Too pretty for prison. Lauren Cutshaw was pulled over in August of 2018 for speeding. The officer who pulled her over claimed that Cutshaw was straight-up belligerent drunk. However, Cutshaw claimed that she only had 2 glasses of wine that entire evening. The story is pretty standard so far. Someone gets pulled over and tries to talk their way out of getting a ticket or getting arrested. The dashcam footage, however, revealed an interesting take. Cutshaw trying to talk her way out of possible jail time by claiming that she was too pretty to be arrested. The 34-year-old former cheerleader and real estate agent told the arresting officer that she was a clean, thoroughbred white girl. Her blood alcohol levels were found to be 0.18%, and she was escorted back to the squad car in handcuffs. While being led to the car, Cutshaw made repeated claims that her partner was also an officer, that she belonged to a good neighborhood, how she used to be a cheerleader and was in a sorority, and how she should not be taken into custody because she was too pretty to be in prison. The officer responded to her claims with, "What does that have to do with anything?" To which Cutshaw replied, "You're a cop? You know what it means?" Implying that she would be treated poorly by fellow prisoners because of her attractive features. Somehow, Lauren Cutshaw managed to get away with a $187 fine and court-ordered alcohol counseling. The dash cam footage of her claiming that she was too pretty for prison went viral shortly ahead of her trial. 6. Cannibal walks free. Issei Sagawa was born into a wealthy family. He was from Japan but had moved to Paris for school. In June of 1981, the unthinkable happened. One night he invited his classmate, Rene Hartevelt, back to his apartment to study and to help him translate some poetry. Sagawa was a short, meek man compared to Hartevelt. While Hartevelt was sitting at a desk in his apartment with her back turned towards him, Sagawa shot her in the back of the head, killing her. Hartevelt died immediately, and Sagawa claims that he fainted from the shock of what he had just done. When he regained consciousness moments later, he carried out his original plan, to have intercourse with her corpse, dismember her, and then devour her. In his confession, Sagawa claimed that he believed he could absorb Hartevelt's energy if he ate her. But let's go back to that horrible night. Sagawa's teeth were not sharp enough to bite through Hartevelt's skin and resorted to using a butcher knife to slice into her. He chopped her body up into small pieces, threw some of those pieces in a plastic bag, and stored it in the fridge. According to Sagawa's confession, he saved the fattest parts to eat later. Sagawa was caught when he tried to dump Hartevelt's body that he stuffed in a suitcase nearby at a public lake. Reportedly, a suspicious person walked by him, came up to him, and demanded to know what he was carrying in his suitcase. Call it a hunch. This is where the case gets even more interesting. Not only did Sagawa confess, he provided detailed descriptions of what he wanted to do with the remaining parts of Hartevelt's body had he not been caught. Sagawa also had a previous criminal charge of attempted rape in Japan. However, after serving less than 10 months in prison, Sagawa was released on the grounds of insanity, and his original trial was deemed as a mistrial because of unlawful psychological evaluation. The Japanese trust fund kid was deported back to Japan, where he began to live the life of a sensationalized celebrity. Because the charges in France had been dropped, the court documents were sealed and could not be released to Japanese authorities. Therefore, the Japanese had no case against Sagawa and no choice but to let him go. Sagawa became popular in his country as the man who had killed a woman and then ate her body. What is he up to today? Today, Issei Sagawa walks the streets of Tokyo, free to do as he pleases. 5. The Menendez brothers. Joseph Lyle and Eric Galen Menendez are siblings born in 1968 and 1970, respectively. Their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, were quite wealthy and moved to the States from their hometown in Havana, Cuba. The couple maintained their lavish lifestyle in their new location. The family originally moved to New Jersey before settling in Beverly Hills, California. Both brothers received their education from Beverly Hills High. On the surface, everything seemed to be going fine in the Menendez household. Everyone had everything they could ever hope for and then some. However, something sinister was going on behind closed doors. Their father, Jose, had been sexually, physically, and emotionally abusing his sons for years. Jose would routinely threaten the boys if they ever exposed him. Kitty was allegedly an unwitting accomplice to Jose's crimes against the boys. On the evening of August 20th in 1987, Eric and Lyle came home to find their parents sleeping on the couch. The brothers first shot Jose with a single gunshot wound. Kitty woke up from the commotion and tried to escape. The boys shot her multiple times, leaving her body unrecognizable. They shot both of their parents in the knees to make the murders look mob-related. The brothers then called 911 and told them that their parents had just been killed. The police immediately considered the young men suspects but had no leads. So the police had no choice but to believe that mob leaders really were involved in the deaths of Jose and Kitty. It wasn't until Eric broke down and confessed in front of his therapist, and he subsequently revealed the confession to his mistress, that the brothers were arrested. The two brothers reportedly spent close to $1 million in the months following their parents' murder. They spent money on a dual condo, several designer cars, tennis lessons, and other extravagant purchases. While the brothers and witnesses gave evidence of sexual abuse being committed, a jury eventually found both of them guilty. Eric and Lyle Menendez were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the first-degree murder of their parents. What do you think about this case? Do you think it's fair that Joseph and Eric got life in prison after the trauma their parents put them through? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. 4. Getting away with murder. Again. Seymour Durst is known as the inventor of the national debt clock, for being one of the wealthiest men of his time, and for starting a real estate empire. His son, Robert Durst, is known for being a serial killer who got away with 3 murders: his wife's, his neighbor's, and one of his friends. Durst was born in April of 1943 as the eldest of the Durst children. Robert was in line to become the heir of the Durst organization, originally founded in 1927 by his grandfather. As a child, his therapist noticed several odd behavioral tics in the boy: sibling rivalry, narcissism, and isolation, all which he received regular therapy sessions for. Durst was reportedly never interested in taking over the Durst organization, and instead started a food and wellness store in the 1970s. His father eventually called him back to New York to take over the real estate empire, but had to withdraw from his decision when he noted Robert acting inappropriately on more than one occasion. The empire was then given to his brother Douglas, and Robert was bought out of the family share of the empire for $7 million. Robert has been connected to 3 murders. All 3 began as disappearances: Catherine McCormick, Susan Berman, and Morris Black. Robert had met McCormick in 1971 while he was running his health and wellness store in Vermont. The two were married by 1973. The marriage was turbulent, to say the least. McCormick reportedly asked Durst for a divorce several times, but Durst would always blackmail her back into the relationship. In 1982, McCormick went missing after attending a party at a friend's home. She was never found. Longtime friend Susan Berman was found murdered in her home execution style in December of 2000. Although Durst was the last person to have allegedly met with Berman before her body was found, there was no case against him. It wasn't until Durst's neighbor, Morris Black, was dismembered in 2001 that police began looking into Durst as a possible serial killer. The trial began, and there was substantial evidence against him. However, all of it was deemed as inadmissible in court. The only conviction Durst received was for the murder of Susan Berman. Durst had been presented in court on multiple occasions: 2003, 2005, 2015, and 2020, the last of which got him a conviction of first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, bail jumping, illegally possessing a firearm, and misdemeanor criminal mischief. For decades, Durst was a free man. Now, at 78 years old, he is currently serving time in California State Prison. 3. A murderer and a philanthropist. John Dupont was born into a wealthy family and inherited a large chunk of land from his maternal grandfather. He studied science, excelled in his field, and made smart investments. In 1987, it was reported that Dupont was worth $200 million. To date, he's the only man from the Forbes 400 list to have been charged with murder. Dupont developed a 400-acre wrestling facility for amateur wrestlers at Lissitor Hall Farm in Newtown Square. The private group was known as Team Foxcatcher. The state-of-the-art facility was equipped with pools, gyms, and everything necessary for training. Dave Schultz was an Olympian freestyle training wrestler living at Dupont's estate. Schultz was just one of many freestyle wrestlers living at the wealthy philanthropist estate in the 1990s. Dupont made it a point to have Olympians come live under his wing and train alongside some of the greatest trainers in the world. Although not a wrestler himself, Dupont was simply obsessed with the sport. In January of 1996, Dupont shot Dave Schultz 3 times. The crime was witnessed by his wife and head of security. Reportedly, Dupont acted as if nothing had really happened and just sat back in the car after committing the murder. The trial was sensationalized for several reasons: Dupont's wealth, his philanthropy, his erratic behavior leading up to the murder, and the fact that he refused to incriminate himself even with 2 eyewitnesses to the crime. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity at trial in February of 1997. A court eventually ruled that he was guilty, but mentally ill. For the murder of Dave Schultz, Dupont received 13 to 30 years in prison. He would have been a free man in 2026, but died in prison in 2010 at the age of 72. 2. Cameron Douglas's side career as a drug kingpin. You're probably familiar with the celebrity Michael Douglas, who has several Academy Awards and accolades to his name. He's received a hefty number of nominations and awards for his contributions in film and media throughout his career. However, his son, Cameron Douglas, received none of the fame and all of the notoriety. Cameron was training to be an actor and had several small roles in film before his arrest in 2011. He got busted in 1999 when he was found in possession of cocaine and charged with a misdemeanor and the possession of a controlled substance. 10 years later, in 2009, Cameron was arrested after it was discovered that he was involved in a serious drug trafficking ring. The DEA had been working a sting on the case for 3 years before arresting Cameron in Manhattan. He had been caught distributing several pounds of methamphetamine out of a Manhattan hotel. Although Cameron Douglas should have gone to jail, he was placed on house arrest, probably because of who his father was. In 2010, he was found in violation of the arrest when his girlfriend was found smuggling drugs to him. Douglas was then sent to a maximum security prison. The next year, in 2011, he was busted once again when it was found out that he had been receiving drugs through prison routes. From 2012 to 2014, Cameron Douglas was placed in solitary confinement due to his erratic behavior and the prison facility's claims that they could not handle the prisoner's drug use anymore. While Douglas was set to serve a longer prison sentence, he was eventually released in 2016. Cameron Douglas was released to a halfway house in August of 2016 after having spent 7 years behind bars and 2 years in segregated housing. Today, the once aspiring actor lives quietly with his long-term partner and 2 children. But is he really just living a simple life? Or has he just not been caught yet, doing something he shouldn't be doing? 1. Hank's Payout. In California in August of 2015, Chester Marlon Hanks was reportedly driving while under the influence and collided with Terry Mugen's vehicle. While both drivers were unscathed by the accident and the damages were repairable, Mugen decided he wanted to pursue a legal claim against Chester and his parents, Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson. Mugen stated the grounds for his case against the Hanks family was because Chester was no stranger to making bad decisions. A self-proclaimed black sheep, Chester had been arrested and fined in 1999 in Britain for the possession of illegal substances. His ex-girlfriend was awarded a restraining order against him for verbal and physical abuse. Despite this, Mugen's claim alleges that the Hanks family facilitated Chester's behavior by allowing him to drive a vehicle knowing he was capable of inflicting harm. Mugen tried suing the Hanks family for well over $1 million, although nothing has come out of the case yet. To us, this just sounds like a bitter person coming after the son of a celebrity because they believe it'll get a big payout. What do you think?
Number 10. The Champion Surfer. In 2019, champion surfer Luzimara Souza was training in the ocean off the coast of Brazil when she was struck by lightning. The 23-year-old woman was pulled unconscious from the water. Souza had been practicing her moves on the Leste Oeste beach during a rainstorm, not anticipating a bolt of such intense electricity to be drawn to her as if she was a lightning rod. She was rushed to the hospital, but sadly died from her injuries shortly after. According to what the professional surfer's mother told local news, she'd been surfing in the waves on the beach just before it started to rain. There were several other people in the water as well when the rain came, and a total of 6 were affected by the bolt of lightning. Even the man who dragged Souza from the water was sent to the hospital due to injuries he sustained. It hit Souza and then rippled through the water, zapping everyone near her. Sadly, Souza's career ended with that unexpected lightning bolt. She had began her surfing career at just 10 years old, going on to win Sarah Championship in 2018. At the time of her death, she was training for the 2019 Brazilian Surf Championship. Number 9. Walking the dogs. A man was walking his dog in Texas back in 2019 when he was struck by lightning. His name is Alex Correas, a resident of Harris County. Alex was walking his dogs when a thunderstorm moved into the area. This isn't that big of a deal, and he never thought in a million years he would be hit by a lightning bolt. According to the National Weather Service, the odds of being struck by lightning are minuscule. You have a 1 in 15,300 chance of being directly hit by lightning in Texas. Still, the 27-year-old mechanic knew he should get out of the storm. He started walking faster, and that's when his memory went blank. According to what he told local news, Alex has no recollection of being hit. He remembers walking, then everything went dark. Luckily for us, Alex was captured on video at the moment of the strike. In the footage, you can clearly see a tiny bolt of electricity zigzag out of the air and hit the concrete just behind him. Alex fell forward, unconscious, as if he'd just been whacked over the head. It goes to show how powerful a lightning bolt can be. Alex wasn't even hit directly, and the shock was still enough to knock him out. He suffered a swollen eye from where he hit the concrete and had to remain recovering in the hospital for 4 days. Even though the lightning hadn't hit him, the electricity had traveled up his leg, giving him a pretty good jolt. It's just lucky the person filming was able to quickly call 911 and get him to the hospital. Number 8. The whole football team. In 1998, lightning killed an entire football team in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It was one of the most bizarre and tragic mass lightning fatalities in history. All 11 members of the football team died at a weekend match, with 30 other people receiving burns from the sudden lightning storm. The exact details about what happened remain obscure even still to this day. All anyone really knows is that lightning came out of nowhere and struck the field they were playing on, and the entire team fell dead. What's truly bizarre is that their opponents were left untouched. Imagine watching a football game only to see lightning specifically hit all the members of one team. In typical Congolese style, witchcraft was to blame for the natural event. What else would you call it? The match was being played in the eastern province of Kasai. The athletes playing for the home team of Basanga walked off the field completely unscathed. Fans of the opposing team then began accusing them of using dark magic to summon the lightning storm because they were losing the game. This obviously wasn't the case. There's no way someone could have summoned a lightning storm using magic, right? Nonetheless, blaming people for using dark magic is pretty common throughout Western and Central Africa. According to The Independent, some football fans even get witch doctors to place hexes on the opposing team members before a game starts. But in this case, it really was just a freak lightning storm. Number 7. A Florida Miracle. It was a Sunday afternoon in June 2021 when Mark Johnson and his son saw the thunderstorm moving towards them. They were on Jupiter Island in Florida in the middle of a weekend fishing trip. They spotted the bad weather coming in and decided to hightail it out of there. As they walked back to the parking lot, they stuck close to the water to avoid the extremely hot sand on their bare feet. There were other people still sunbathing on the sand. Not everyone seemed bothered that a raging storm was approaching. Somewhat ironically, it was the two people who were actually fleeing the storm that ended up being victims of it. As they walked up the beach, lightning struck. Both of them blacked out and woke up an undetermined amount of time later with their faces in the sand. The lifeguard on the beach had seen what happened and rushed to perform CPR and other first aid. He ended up breaking two of the father's ribs just trying to keep him alive. He had no pulse and things weren't looking good. In the end, an ambulance came and both men were taken away on stretchers. As it turned out, a lightning bolt had hit either the father or the son and then jumped into the other, knocking them both unconscious. They both made full recoveries, but it was extremely close for Mark Johnson. He literally had to be brought back to life. Do you know anyone that's been struck by lightning? Let us know your stories in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe before the end of the video. Number 6. The worst golf trip. In 2021, at the Pine Hills Golf Course near Scranton in Pennsylvania, a 71-year-old man was killed by lightning. It was 1:30 p.m. on a Friday, and Joseph Slavinsky was trying to seek shelter. He saw the storm coming and hurried to get off the green, but he didn't make it. The bolt of lightning came down like a heat-seeking missile and killed him. It was just awful, but at least he died doing what he loved. I'm sure Joseph would have rather kept on living, but if he had to go unexpectedly, it was probably better on a golf course than in the back of a taxi or something. Now here's some information that's going to really shock you. No pun intended. Joseph was the second golfer to die from lightning in 2021 and the third documented lightning fatality of the year. This is according to the National Lightning Safety Council. The death right before Joseph happened in New Jersey at the Burlington Country Club. The victim was 70-year-old Michael Ward. He was playing a game on June 9th when he was hit by lightning and died. Since 2006, there have been at least a dozen documented golfers killed by lightning strikes. 9 of them were hit as they were actively playing, while others were hit while standing under trees or cowering under something. It's been recommended that if you're golfing and a thunderstorm comes your way, put your clubs down, move away from the golf cart, take off your shoes, and stay far away from trees. If your hair stands on end, it means you're about to be hit by lightning, and there's not really much you can do about it. Number 5. Death at the Jersey Shore. A young lifeguard was the victim of a terrifying lightning strike on the New Jersey shore. The victim, Keith Pinto, was around 19 years old when the tragedy unfolded in August of 2021. He, 3 other lifeguards, and 4 civilians were all affected when the lightning bolt hit the beach. Keith was the only one fatally struck, though the rest did receive some serious shocks. According to Vince Ruffalo, who was visiting the beach from Wisconsin, it was like a bomb went off. Vince was 56 feet away, but could still feel the force of the lightning strike. So powerful, it knocked Vince and his friends to the ground. Why was the young lifeguard the only fatality? It was probably because he was sitting on the lifeguard chair, meaning the lightning was attracted to him. He was essentially sitting on the giant tower, and that focused the electricity straight through his body. It was a terrible loss for the Jersey Shore, and just devastating for Keith's family. Number 4. Tragedy in the Congo. 2022 did not start well for the people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. A lightning bolt struck a power cable on the outskirts of Kinshasa, resulting in the horrifying deaths of 26 people. The lightning bolt didn't actually kill anyone, but the chaos caused by hitting the power cables certainly did. The cable snapped, fell on some houses, and thrashed through a local market. The victims were 2 men and 24 women. It was like a massive snake spitting electricity from its mouth, thrashing around and zapping people as they screamed and tried to get away. Officials in the Congolese capital blamed outdated infrastructure. The city isn't exactly up to code, with power lines running haphazardly all over the place and houses and markets built over top each other. It just so happened that this time, the lightning broke the cable at peak shopping hours, right in the heart of a very busy marketplace. Number 3. Murder by lightning. A young man in Florida was killed on July 17, 2021, while relaxing on the beach. His name was Walker Bethune, and he was enjoying a sunny day near Marco Island when the unimaginable happened. The sky clouded over, a lightning bolt came down, and Walker was dead before he even knew to run. He was the 4th lightning fatality of 2021, just a day after Joseph Slavinsky, the Pennsylvania golfer we just talked about. Sadly, this isn't even that rare. We already know at least a dozen golfers have died since 2006, but the National Lightning Safety Council also says there have been at least 76 lightning deaths in Florida since the same year. It's one of the most dangerous places in North America to be if you're not a fan of getting zapped by a great bolt of electricity from the sky. In September of 2020, a man named Jesus Perez was fatally electrocuted while standing in his yard. Earlier that same year, Raul Romtoba died in the town of Middleburg while working on his roof. The point is that if you live in Florida, your chances of getting hit by lightning are surprisingly high. Number 2. Lightning in India. In March of 2021, 4 gardeners in the Indian city of Delhi took shelter under a tree. It was raining heavily, and the sky was roaring with thunder. Minutes later, there was an orange flash. A lightning bolt hit a tree. All 4 gardeners fell to the ground, and one of them had died. The others survived, but were severely burned. One of the survivors told a local newspaper that he can't remember a thing and that he blacked out the second the electricity hit him. If you thought Florida was bad with 76 deaths, wait till you hear these absurd numbers. In India, lightning strikes have killed over 100,000 people since 1967. The bad news is, well, it's getting worse. India's meteorological office has been doing lightning forecasts for years now. Through their research, they've discovered that the number of lightning strikes per year has risen sharply. Between April of 2020 and March of 2021, there was a 34% increase in lightning strikes, about 18 million of them. This is just a small piece of data, but it doesn't look good. If the storms continue to increase in severity, India could be looking at an epidemic of lightning strikes. People could be dropping like flies from random thunderstorms and intense electrical activity. Just going for a walk on a rainy day could turn into a deadly gamble. And number 1, Selfie interrupted. A lightning strike in India killed 16 people in 2021. Yes, a single storm killed over a dozen people. And if that seems surprising, just listen to this. According to the official data, lightning strikes kill over 2,000 people in India on average every single year. This particular incident happened on top of a watchtower in Jaipur. This is a pretty popular tourist destination in the north of India, known for its archaeological sites. Tourists had gathered at the city's famous 12th century armor fort when lightning began crashing down all around them. As they were taking selfies and snapping pictures of the raging storm, it turned its attention to them. 27 tourists were on the tower, and only 11 of them walked away with their lives. They were basically under fire by bolts of electricity, with the tourists screaming and scrambling to get away. It was a total pandemonium, and the last thing the tourists had expected when they climbed the tower that morning. It's honestly hard to imagine just how terrifying this must have been for everyone present. Imagine going to visit the Statue of Liberty, only for lightning bolts to start picking people off one at a time. It would be horrifying. Sadly for the people of India, these weren't the only lightning deaths to happen that week. And after that, 41 people were killed in the state of Uttar Pradesh.
Ten. Painted masks. A pair of influencers were arrested in a foreign country for a prank that went very, very wrong. One of the pranksters painted her face during the height of the pandemic in 2021, instead of actually wearing a fabric mask. The culprits are Josh Paler Lynn and Leah Sin. They staged the ridiculous stunt by going into a supermarket, with Leia having the bottom half of her face painted blue and white to look like a mask. This was in Indonesia, in Bali. The influencer managed to make it past the security guard and into the supermarket, but that was when they got busted. It was pretty obvious that Leia didn't have a mask on, and that the pair were up to something no good. They couldn't stop giggling, they were filming, and acting generally suspicious. Now, Josh is a Taiwanese content creator who defended his actions by saying it's his job to entertain people. Leia, on the other hand, didn't have any kind of excuse at all. The Russian national had her passport confiscated, as did Josh, and they were brought to an immigration center where they waited to be deported back to their respective nations. Indonesia really doesn't mess around when it comes to breaking their laws, and they really don't like tourists who break laws on camera because they think it's funny. Both of them were deported off the island as soon as possible. 9. Fake officer. If there's one thing you should absolutely never fake, it's being a cop. A man was arrested in South Carolina for impersonating a police officer in June of 2021. The impersonator made the major mistake of pulling over an Assumption Parish sheriff's deputy who happened to be off duty. Vincent Marks turned on his flashing lights as he was driving behind the off-duty officer. The officer pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store, and Vincent blocked him in. He then approached the deputy and flashed a fake badge, but the deputy immediately recognized him. The deputy had seen Vincent before in a domestic incident that he'd been called to earlier that year. The jig was up. Vincent was busted immediately and hauled off to jail. But Vincent wasn't the only guy recently impersonating an officer. On March 4, 2022, another man by the name of Jason Brittenstein was arrested for posing as a cop and trying to extort an undercover cop, a real undercover cop, for inappropriate favors. The undercover officer was part of a sting operation to pick up Johns at a greasy hotel in Westerville, Ohio. That was when Jason showed up as one of the Johns. But rather than offering money in exchange for intimate time alone with a woman, he identified himself as a police officer and started making demands. He said that if she didn't do what he told her, she was going to be in big trouble. In other words, this guy was posing as a cop to try and cheat prostitutes into giving him free service. 8. Victim assistance. Sherry Papini, a mother originally from Redding, California, was reported missing on November 2, 2016. She was discovered 22 days later on the side of the road. Sherry was picked up by a trucker just about 150 miles from her house. It looked as though she had been tied up with rope and abused. She even had a brand on her right shoulder that had been pressed on with hot metal. It looked like she had been through a lot. Sherry told the authorities she was kidnapped by a pair of Hispanic women and held for nearly a month against her will. She described them to an FBI artist, described their vehicle to the police, and a $10,000 reward was offered for any information that would lead to an arrest. The only person who was ever arrested was Sherry Papini herself. The California mother had made the whole thing up. She was faking it. An investigation proved that she had been living with an old boyfriend in Costa Mesa totally of her own volition. She was the one who harmed herself to help support her story. Why would somebody do this? Between 2017 and 2021, Sherry pulled in $30,000 from victim assistance. Plus, her husband helped her raise $49,000 from GoFundMe in 2016. She did it for the money, but now she's looking at up to 20 years in prison and a fine of over $500,000. 7. Catfishing the Teacher. A pair of students bullied their teacher so effectively in 2017 that it made national news and ruined the teacher's life. It's one of the most bonkers stories that you're ever going to hear, so you better strap yourself in. It all started in North Carolina when Brian Joshua Anderson and Brittany Renee Luckenbaugh decided they were going to humiliate their French teacher. That teacher, David Laughinghouse, was 51 years old at the time. The teenagers were only 16. They assumed a single fake identity, uploaded this identity to a social media site, and started catfishing their teacher. The catfishing worked so well that they managed to trick their French teacher into believing he was having a relationship with a real adult woman. In this case, the teens really got the last laugh. Through their fake profile, they convinced their teacher to send naked photos of himself. Then they shared those photos with their classmates and spread them across the internet. The 51-year-old man, who had been working at the high school for 16 years, was immediately suspended. And considering everyone has seen him naked, he's probably never going back to the school again. He was bullied out of his own job by his own students. The teens were arrested and charged with misdemeanor disclosure of private images, but they were released soon after on $5,000 bonds. 6. COVID-19 Pokemon. A man in Georgia was recently sentenced to spend some time in jail after he illegally obtained relief money for COVID-19 and used it to purchase $57,000 worth of Pokemon. His name is Vinath Odemsine from Dublin, Georgia. He pleaded guilty in October of 2022 to one count of wire fraud. He submitted false information to the United States Small Business Administration when applying for a coronavirus relief loan. He claimed to own an entertainment services business, saying he needed money to help him through the pandemic. In reality, this guy was a total faker. He received $85,000 from the loan program, then used it to buy a Charizard. Yes, Vinath spent all that money on a single Pokemon card worth $57,789. He could have bought a house, he could have bought a brand new car, or he could have even invested that money and actually started a real business. Instead, he bought a single Pokemon trading card, a large red lizard that became wildly popular in the 90s, for an impossible amount of money. Of course, people are allowed to do whatever they want with their money. If you want to save up $50,000 to buy a piece of cardboard, that's perfectly fine. But this guy cheated. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Vinath claimed his non-existent business employed 10 people and grossed $235,000 a year. But it was all a fraud, and now Vinath is paying the price. He was given 3 years in prison and ordered to forfeit the card that he had purchased. He was also fined $10,000 and forced to pay $85,000 in restitution. 5. Tricking Girl Scouts. Sometimes faking it can be funny, but not when the Girl Scouts are involved. A man in Oregon has been busted for tricking Girl Scouts by purchasing their cookies with counterfeit cash. What a tool! A police report was filed by Tiffany Brown on February 16, 2020. She was furious because a man had given her daughter fake money to purchase a box of peanut butter tagalongs. And because the local troop does not recoup its Girl Scouts for any lost profits, all the money for the cookies came out of their own pocket. It was an absolutely despicable crime, and one thing fake money should never be used for. You can't just go around tricking Girl Scouts. Luckily, the victim was able to give a great description of her robber to the police. The cops then worked with a local Walmart to identify the man the next time he arrived at the store. His name is Camden Stevens Ducharme, and he's been arrested on charges of theft and forgery. 4. The Fake Doctor. A man in India pretended to be a doctor. He didn't walk into hospitals and perform surgeries on people while in his doctor disguise. Instead, the man named Bidhu Prakash Swain pretended to be a doctor to trick middle-aged divorced women into marrying him. He prowled dating sites and social media, built up a whole fake persona for himself, and swindled at least 14 women into tying the knot. But after the marriage was official, that's when things went wrong. The fake doctor would leave the woman, saying he had to travel for work. But when he took off, he carried as much of their money as possible. And if you're thinking to yourself, what kind of crazy person would fall for this? The truth is that a lot of people do. According to the FTC, romance-related scams tripled from 2016 to 2020. During the year of 2020, when everyone was locked down in their houses, victims lost somewhere around $300 million being swindled by a cyber romance. Each victim sent, on average, $2,500 to a random person on the internet. As for our fake doctor, he's been on the prowl since 2002. According to India Today, he got married for the first time in 1982 and has been scamming people most of his life. It was a big success until 2020 when one of his wives uncovered the truth about him. When the police launched their investigation, they discovered over 10 stolen ATM cards, different government identification, and fake school certificates. They even found evidence of a different scam where he had been tricking students into paying him cash to secure admissions to certain courses. 3. Anna Delvey. With Netflix's new dramatized documentary, Inventing Anna, the star of the show has gotten a lot of attention. The series on Netflix fictionalized the case of a very real faker, Anna Delvey, aka Anna Sorokin. She moved to New York in 2013 and used her new identity to pretend to be a wealthy German heiress. Amazingly, it worked. She embedded herself inside New York's social scene even though she didn't have any money. She managed to skate by with nothing except her confidence holding her up. In truth, Anna was born in Russia in 1991, moved to Germany in 2007, arrived in London in 2011, and made her way to America, all without any real worthwhile cash. Her first attempt at getting rich involved tricking investors into coughing up money for a fake foundation. When that didn't work, she faked bank statements to show she had access to over $60 million in Swiss bank accounts. She used these fake documents to apply for loans. All the while, she was staying at extremely fancy hotels without ever paying the bills, all while running around with some of the richest people in the city. It all came crashing down on October 3, 2017. That was when Anna was arrested as part of a sting operation and charged on several counts of grand larceny. She was given 12 years in prison. As of 2022, she's still sitting in immigration, waiting to be deported to Germany. 2. Stem cell therapy. Patricia Ashton Durges was elected in November of 2020 to represent Christian County in Missouri. This might shock you, but she was already under investigation for going on local TV and trying to sell stem cells as a cure for COVID-19. Apparently, the community wasn't all that concerned about the ongoing investigation when they elected her. Patricia was already a state lawmaker and a medical professional, and yet she couldn't help herself when it came to a little bit of scamming. She went on local TV and put advertisements on Facebook claiming to provide her clients with a safe and natural cure for COVID-19 using stem cells. It's a lot to unpack. First of all, stem cells are questionable. We don't even fully know the power of stem cells as a treatment for illnesses. But Patricia took it to a whole other level, as she didn't even use stem cells in her stem cell miracle cure. She purchased amniotic fluid from the University of Utah, marketed it as stem cells, and then charged up to $1,450 per milliliter. She raked in about $200,000 for treatments from between December 2018 to May 2020. She didn't only cure COVID-19 with her fake stem cell shots, but also things like kidney disease and Lyme disease. Basically, she had a cure for anything with a fake shot of amniotic fluid. This fraudster was recently indicted by a grand jury. Hopefully, she'll be put behind bars soon before she can trick anybody else. 1. Fake astronauts. 2 men wearing homemade spacesuits managed to swindle over $150,000 out of a businessman in 2018. These fakers claimed to have a deal with NASA and said they could generate electricity from nothing but thunderbolts. The dynamic duo were a father and son team, Virender Brar and his boy Nitin Brar. They told their victim that they were about to sell a very powerful device to NASA as soon as it was ready. All they needed was a little bit of seed money. They duped at least 30 people around the capital of Delhi into giving them cash to help in their endeavor. They tricked people by already looking rich. They also showed off a lot of fake technology that didn't mean anything and strolled around in their fake astronaut suits. When police raided their home, they found a laptop and printer, foreign checkbooks, fake identification, and random stickers saying things like anti-radiation. When the victim was asked why he gave them so much money, he said he was tricked by the fact that they were wearing expensive watches and driving luxury cars. He believed their spacesuits were real and that they were very close to finalizing a deal with NASA for their new technology. In truth, the father and son team had made their spacesuits out of tinfoil. They were just a couple of phonies who preyed on some businessmen who didn't know any better. Which of these fakers do you think really got what they deserved? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching the video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe to the channel and come back soon. See you then. Bye.